He saved the alien warrior. Now they call him a traitor and a legend. Asterisk, the sky above the execution tower was blood red. Dust flew through the air as thousands of alien eyes stared at the center stage. Chains clanked loudly as the alien warrior was pushed forward. Her armor was gone, her weapons taken, but her eyes still burned with fire. Two large guards dragged her across the metal floor. She stumbled, but did not cry out. Her arms were bruised, her face marked with shame symbols. But her back was still straight. Like a true soldier, the crowd began to cheer. They chanted words of hate. They threw rocks and bits of trash. But she didn't blink. Not even once. In the crowd stood a human officer, Lieutenant Daniel Ross. He wore a long brown coat, his face hidden under a military cap. He wasn't supposed to be here. But he had heard whispers of the execution and came to see for himself. He had fought beside her once. On the battlefield of Valor 9, she had saved his life by lifting a burning tank off his body. She had killed enemies that surrounded him, and now she was being killed like a criminal. What did she do? He whispered to a nearby alien. She disobeyed direct orders during the war. The alien spat. She refused to bomb a human refugee ship. Daniel's heart froze. She refused to bomb civilians, and that was her crime. The warrior was forced to kneel on the stage. Her long white hair was messy, covered in dirt and dried blood. A sharp blade hung from a device above her neck. The executioner stood to the side, ready to pull the lever. The alien general stepped forward to speak. She betrayed our command, shamed our army, and made us weak. He shouted, "For this, she shall be erased." The crowd roared in approval, but Daniel's fists clenched. This was not justice. This was a show, a lie, a warning to others who still had hearts. The warrior raised her head slowly. Her golden eyes scanned the crowd. She saw him, Daniel. And for a moment, she gave a tiny nod. He felt something rise in his chest. A scream, a fire, a memory. He couldn't let this happen. He wouldn't. Without thinking, Daniel pushed through. The crowd, one alien guard tried to stop him, but Daniel punched him hard. Another reached for a weapon, but Daniel kicked his leg and ran past. Everyone began to scream. The executioner pulled the lever, but nothing happened. The blade was stuck for one lucky second. It paused above her head. Daniel reached the stage, jumped up, and tackled the nearest guard. The warrior grabbed the other guard's dropped weapon with her chained hands. Even weak, she moved like lightning. She slammed the weapon into the executioner's chest. "Follow me," Daniel shouted, grabbing her arm. They ran together. Chains still dragging from her wrists, the crowd chased after them, throwing more stones and curses. Sirens rang across the sky. The city guards poured out from the steel towers. But Daniel knew the back alleys. He had studied this place during the war. He pulled her down a narrow path between old buildings. "Why are you helping me?" she asked, her voice rough and dry. "Because you didn't deserve to die," he said simply. She stared at him with confused eyes. No one had ever said those words to her. Not even her own people. Behind them, loud footsteps echoed. They had only minutes, maybe less. Daniel stopped near a storage room and kicked the door open. He dragged her inside and closed the door quietly. They were safe for now, but the world outside had changed. And now, Daniel Ross was no longer a soldier. He was a traitor. He looked at the alien warrior as she sat on the cold floor. Her breathing was heavy, her eyes tired. But even now, she didn't look broken. She looked alive. "What do I call you?" he asked. She looked up at him and said, "Thaya." Then she added softly, "You just gave up everything for me." Daniel smiled a little. "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe this is just the beginning." Outside, the sounds of war drums echoed. Again, a new hunt had begun. But something had also been awakened. A strange trust between two enemies. Now bound by chains, fire, and fate, smoke rose from the streets as alarms screamed in every direction. The sky turned dark with patrol drones flying low, scanning the alleys with sharp blue light. Daniel held Thaya's wrist tightly as they ran through broken back paths of the city. She stumbled once, but didn't complain, even as blood dripped. From her side, they had escaped the execution stage only moments ago. But now the whole sector was hunting them like wild animals. Daniel had no plan, no backup, no exit route. Only a decision he couldn't take back. A loudspeaker roared from above, speaking in 3 alien languages. Warning. A human male has assaulted military personnel and aided a condemned traitor. All citizens must report sightings immediately. Thaya glanced at him, her eyes full of something strange. Not anger, not fear, confusion. Maybe you are. Now a fugitive, she said, breathing hard. I know. Daniel replied, but so are you. They stopped behind an old water pipe, steam rising around them. Thaya leaned against the wall, her body shaking slightly. Her shoulder wound was deep, and her chains had cut into her wrists. Daniel pulled out a small med spray and began patching her wounds. You didn't have to do this, she whispered. I did, he answered. No one else was going to. From the rooftops above, a group of enforcer drones flew by. Daniel pulled her into a storage tunnel, closing the grate quietly inside. It was damp and cold, but safe for now. They sat in silence, breathing slow. Surrounded by darkness, Thaya finally spoke again, her voice low. I was ordered to destroy a refugee ship. Daniel looked at her, waiting. There were humans aboard, she said. Children. Daniel felt something tighten in his chest. You refused. He said softly, yes. She nodded. I was told it was weakness. He looked away, his mind racing. She had done what most soldiers never would. She had chosen life over orders, and for that, they put a death sentence on her, suddenly. Voices echoed outside the tunnel. Guards were getting closer. Daniel stood up quickly, pulling her to her feet. We need to move, he whispered. Now. They exited through the back vent and dropped into a lower level. It was part of the old war ruins, abandoned after the peace treaty. No lights, just rubble and broken walls. A place forgotten by both sides as they moved deeper into the ruins. Thaya paused. Her legs trembled and she fell to one knee. Daniel rushed to her side, catching her before she hit the ground. You're bleeding again, he said, lifting her carefully. I'll slow you down, she said, her voice weak. He didn't answer, just carried her toward a nearby bunker. Entrance. Inside, the dust was thick and the air was heavy, but it was safe for a moment. Daniel laid her on a piece of old cloth and checked her wounds again. You're not a soldier anymore, she said, looking up at him. No, he agreed. Now, I'm something else. A message beeped on his wrist device. He checked at his. Una had issued a kill order on him. He was now marked as a class A traitor. He stared at the message for a few seconds before deleting it. Still sure? She asked quietly. Daniel didn't answer, but his face said everything. She closed her eyes and whispered something in her own language. It sounded like a prayer, or maybe a goodbye. Daniel watched her breathing slow. She needed real help soon, or she wouldn't survive the night, but there was no one left to trust. He opened a secret pouch on his belt. Pulling out an old war map, there was a contact zone nearby, once used by smugglers. If he could reach it, maybe they could escape this city. He stared at Thaya again, at the strange symbols on her skin. Battle marks of her people, one earned. Through pain, she had saved lives by disobeying orders. He had saved her by breaking every rule. Now both of them were hunted, hated, and completely alone, but somewhere deep inside. Daniel didn't feel regret. He felt something else, purpose. A loud crash echoed above them. The guards were near. Maybe already on their scent, he grabbed his blaster, ready for the worst. Then looked back at the injured warrior resting behind him. He didn't know where this path would lead. But one thing was clear. There was no turning back now. Together, they had stepped into fire, and the whole galaxy was watching. The firelight flickered inside the broken bunker as night swallowed the city above. Cold wind howled through the cracks in the walls. Whispering warnings neither of them understood, Thea lay still, her skin pale, her breath shallow. Daniel sat beside her, staring at her face, watching each slow inhale as if counting down a final moment. She had been strong during the escape, silent and proud, even while bleeding. But now, her body had reached its limit. Her wounds had reopened, and her body shook with fever. Daniel touched her forehead, burned like a furnace. "Stay with me," he whispered. Though he wasn't sure if she could hear him, she didn't respond, only groaned softly and turned her head. Her chains were still wrapped around her wrists, stained with dried blood and rust. He carefully unfastened them, tossing them aside like the shame they once carried. He opened his emergency kit, half-used and dusty. He had a few med strips, one blood fusor, and an old injection module. Nothing meant for alien biology, but it was all he had. He stared at the glowing vials, trying to guess which one wouldn't kill her. He remembered something. Her blood had turned dark earlier, almost black. It wasn't blood poisoning. It was something else, something from her species, something triggered by energy stress. He pulled out a cooling patch and pressed it against her chest. Her body jerked slightly, but then settled. Her skin shimmered faintly under the firelight's strange silver veins pulsing beneath the surface. Like circuits, he thought, or biowires. He adjusted the blood fusor and attached it to her neck carefully. The device hissed, then clicked to green. He breathed in relief. At least it wasn't rejected. Her breathing slowed, her body relaxed. Slightly, Daniel leaned back, his eyes heavy from exhaustion. He hadn't slept since the execution square, and now he was hiding in the bones of a forgotten war, tending to a dying alien he barely knew. But somehow, he felt more alive than ever. She opened her eyes just a little. "Why?" she asked, her voice weak. Daniel blinked, unsure if she was really awake. "You should have let me die," she whispered. He shook his head, his voice calm but firm. "No one should die like that." She stared at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she looked away. Eyes fixed on the crumbling ceiling. "I was ready," she said. "I accepted it." "But I didn't," he replied, "and that's enough." Silence wrapped around them, thick and strange. Only the fire crackled and the wind moaned in the shadows. Daniel stood up, walked to the corner, and activated his wrist comlink. No signal, just static. He cursed under his breath. They were completely cut off. Outside, the city burned with patrols and hate. Inside, he had one half-dead warrior and no plan. He returned to her side, sat quietly. Thea reached out with trembling fingers and touched his coat. Her voice was softer now, almost like a memory. "My people, don't cry when we die." Daniel nodded slowly. "Humans do," he said. "Sometimes too much." Her fingers curled weakly. "Then let go. You're strange, Daniel," she said, kind. "But strange." He smiled just a little. "I get that a lot." She closed her eyes again. Resting, Daniel didn't move, just listened to the rhythm of her breath. For a moment, the bunker didn't feel like a grave. It felt like shelter, but hope was fragile here. He knew they couldn't stay long. Soon, they'd have to move. The hunters were still out there, and they wouldn't stop. Suddenly, a sharp noise echoed outside, metal scraping on concrete. Footsteps, 3, maybe 4. Daniel grabbed his blaster and moved to the wall. He looked back at Thea. She was barely conscious, too weak to fight. He had to defend her now. not just because she had saved him once, but because no one else would. Because she was more than a warrior, she was proof that mercy still had meaning. The door rattled as someone tried to break in. Daniel raised his weapon, his heart pounding. He wasn't ready to die, but if he had to, he would make sure she lived. The noise stopped, silence returned, then footsteps retreated slowly. He waited, finger on the trigger, breath held. Only after several minutes did he lower the weapon. He turned back to her and sat down. "You're safe," he whispered. Now, Thaya didn't answer, but a faint smile touched her lips, just barely. Daniel leaned back against the wall and closed his eyes. He was tired, cold, and hunted, but in that moment he wasn't alone, and neither was she. The dead ship was buried beneath layers of ash, its wings stretched like bones beneath the ruins. Of the war, no lights, no hum, no sign of life, just silence. Most would have walked past it, mistaking it for scrap, but Daniel stopped, his breath frozen in his chest. "That's not junk," he said softly. Eyes locked on the shape. Beside him, Thaya narrowed her eyes, still weak but alert. She leaned forward slowly, her hand resting on his arm. "That's a Valkyr-class interceptor," she whispered. Her voice held a note of disbelief. "They were all destroyed, except this one," Daniel replied, stepping toward it. The ruins had swallowed the entrance. But Daniel found a crack beneath a fallen beam. With effort, he pried it open, and a sharp gust of stale air rushed out. He looked back at Thaya, then motioned her to follow. Together, they crawled inside the forgotten machine. The interior was coated in dust and time. Wires hung like vines, and shattered panels blinked dimly. But the core system still had power, just enough to be alive. Thaya brushed her fingers against a control console. The surface lit up faintly, reacting to her touch. Daniel raised his eyebrows. "Impressed? You know how to fly one of these?" She nodded, then paused. "I was trained on a similar model," she said, "but this one, it's old, older than my birth." Daniel stepped into the pilot seat and tried to activate the panel. Nothing happened. He frowned and looked toward Thaya, who was moving carefully through the cockpit. Her eyes scanned the markings, and her fingers traced symbols etched into the walls. "This ship belonged to the First War," she said. "My great-grandmother's time." Daniel opened a panel and connected his wrist link to the interface. It sparked, then hissed. The lights flared, then shut off again. "Manual override failed," he muttered. Thaya tried next, placing her palm on the ship's biosensor. The system blinked once, scanned her blood, then went completely dark. "Access denied," the screen read. "They erased me here too," she whispered, her voice hollow. Daniel stared at the words, then at her. "They erased your identity from even the ships." Thaya sat down slowly, her strength still recovering. "My name, my codes. My status all deleted after my trial," she said. "To them, I don't exist." Daniel leaned back, exhaling hard. "Then we'll make our own way in," he said. Rolling up his sleeves, he moved toward the core panel and began opening circuit paths. "Do you even know what you're doing?" Thaya asked. "No," he said, with a small smile. "But if I poke it hard enough, might scream." Hours passed, the ship groaned, sparks flew, and systems flickered. But nothing worked. Every command was locked behind a ghost ID. Thaya sat quietly, watching him. She admired the way he kept going, even when the odds said stop. "You're wasting time," she finally said. "I've done worse things with my time." Daniel replied, wiping sweat from his forehead. Then something changed. The ship suddenly made a noise like an old beast waking up. A low hum filled the air, and a small display lit up near Thaya. She stood and walked to it, surprised. "What is it?" Daniel asked. "A memory file," she said, her voice tense, encrypted, but active. He joined her, and together they opened it. The screen showed a Figuran alien leader speaking in private. The audio was scrambled, but a few words broke through. Peace is not profitable. Remove her quietly. Thea's face went cold. That's my trial, she said slowly. This is before the judgment. Daniel's hands clenched into fists. They planned it. Even before you refused the bombing, this wasn't about disobedience, Thea. Whispered, it was about silencing me. Daniel looked around the ship, heart pounding. This isn't just a ride out of here, he said. This is a vault of truth, but we can't launch it. Thea said, it won't let me fly it. Daniel thought for a moment. Then looked at the old pilot's seat. He climbed in and pressed his hand against the sensor. To his shock, the system blinked twice. Then turned green. Human pilot registered. The ship said in a dead voice. Thea stared at him, confused. You're not supposed to be able to do that. Daniel looked at her, just as surprised. Well, guess I'm not supposed to do a lot of things behind them. The engines hummed for the first time in years. The ship stirred beneath the ruins. Ready to breathe again, but outside, trackers had already picked up the signal. The hunt was coming, and now, the whole galaxy would want what they had. Rain tapped against the cracked canopy of the old warship like soft fingers knocking on a coffin. The engines were quiet now, resting after a failed test launch. Steam drifted from the vents, and wires sparkled with tired sparks inside the cockpit. The silence between them felt louder than any alarm. Thea sat with her knees drawn to her chest, arms wrapped tight around herself. She stared at the blinking console that had refused her identity. A ship built by her ancestors had denied her. Rejected her, erased her blood. She didn't speak. Not even when Daniel placed a heat pack beside her. He didn't expect her to talk. She hadn't said much since the ship played the secret message. The one that showed her trial was a setup. The words kept playing in his head. Peace is not profitable. Remove her quietly. He paced the cockpit slowly, unsure of what to say. She looked strong on the outside her warrior scars, her cold stare, her quiet calm. But her silence now was different. It wasn't strength, it was something breaking. I didn't save you. Because I had a plan, Daniel said at last. She didn't move, didn't even blink. He sat down across from her, legs crossed, tired but calm. I was in the crowd that day, he said. I saw your eyes before the blade came down. They were not the eyes of a killer, not the eyes of a coward. They were the eyes of someone who was ready to die alone. Thea's lip trembled slightly, but she said nothing. Daniel leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I've seen many people die in war, he said, but you were the first. One I couldn't watch die. Her shoulders stiffened. Daniel kept going, slowly, carefully, like walking through fire. You saved me once, remember? He said, Valor 9. When the explosion buried my unit, I thought I was done. Just another name to burn into a wall. You lifted that wreck off me like I weighed nothing, he said, smiling a little. I asked why you risked it. And you said, I saw a man not ready to die. She turned her face slightly away from him, but her eyes were open now, watching the floor as if it were breathing. I didn't forget that, he said, and when I saw you chained on that stage, I knew I had to return that moment. I didn't do it because I'm noble, or brave, or stupid, he said softly. I did it because someone once looked at me like I was worth saving. A tear rolled down her cheek before she even realized it. It touched her skin like acid, burning everything she had held inside. She wiped it quickly, but more followed, silent and steady. Her body didn't shake. Her voice didn't rise, but her tears told the story she never spoke aloud. She had been strong for so long, too long. She didn't know how to fall apart without shame. Until now, I gave everything to them. She said at last, her voice cracking, my blood, my loyalty, my name. And they took it all and threw me to die like a dog. Daniel didn't try to stop her. He let her speak. Let the pain come like a flood. They called me a hero. 1 week, she said, a traitor the next, all because I wouldn't kill children. Her hands clenched tightly around her arms. I thought I could carry the shame. Thought I could die with honor, she whispered. But you pulled me back. Daniel nodded slowly. Maybe that's what we do for each other, he said. Catch one another before the fall. Thaya looked at him through her tears. Not as a human, not as a soldier, not as the one who broke the rules, but as someone who had chosen her over everything. And something in her heart shifted. You should hate me, she said. Why? He asked. Because I'm the enemy, she said. Because my people killed yours. Because I don't belong anywhere anymore. He shook his head. I don't care what you were, he said. I care about who you are now, and what I see is someone worth fighting for. The storm outside grew stronger, but the cockpit felt warm, not from the systems, but from something new. Something fragile. Trust. Daniel leaned back, resting his head against the wall. We can't fix the past, he said, but we can burn a path forward. Thaya wiped her face with her sleeve, then reached for his hand. Not as a soldier, not as a refugee, but as someone who didn't want to be alone anymore. And for the first time in her life, she didn't feel like she was. The air changed the moment they crossed the broken threshold. It was colder, heavier. Like the wind carried old memories. Daniel stepped forward carefully, his boots crunching over dead leaves and shards of blackened glass. Behind him, Thaya walked silently, her hand never far from her weapon. They had left the dead city behind, slipped past patrols under moonlight, and now walked through a place even maps refused to name. Locals called it the Forbidden Zone, a place where machines shut down without warning, a place where ships vanished mid-signal, a place where no one returned, but Thaya remembered it from stories passed down in whispers. Old archives, sealed away in alien temples, spoke of a war command station hidden deep inside. If the truth they found in the memory crystal had a beginning, it started here. If proof of her innocence existed, it might still sleep in the shadows. Of this graveyard, the path narrowed as they walked between jagged cliffs. Strange metal spikes rose from the ground, bent like fingers clawing out of the earth. Daniel scanned the area with his wrist device. The screen glitched and went black. Tech. Failure, he muttered, tapping it. Guess the stories were true. Thaya stopped beside him and looked up at the sky. Clouds swirled unnaturally above them, almost too fast, too smooth. I feel it too, she said. This place doesn't want us here. Daniel took a deep breath and kept walking. He didn't come this far to turn back now. After hours of walking, they reached what looked like a crater. But as they stepped closer, the ground below pulsed faintly with light. A hidden doorway revealed itself, buried beneath layers of dirt and forgotten metal. Thaya knelt beside it, placing her hand against the old panel. To her surprise, the console blinked red. Then green, then still. It remembers me, she said, stunned. This place hasn't been updated. Daniel helped her lift the hatch, and the ground opened with a hiss. A ramp descended into the darkness below. They exchanged a look, no words needed, and together they stepped into the belly of the past. The corridor was tight, lined with ancient screens and broken lights. Symbols from Thaya's language ran along the wall's orders, warnings, commands. Dust covered everything like a forgotten layer of time, but the core systems still hummed. Weak but alive, they reached a large chamber, one that pulsed with a blue glow. A crystal sphere hovered in the center, rotating slowly. Daniel stared in awe. What is it? Thaya stepped forward carefully, her fingers brushing over the console. It's a memory core, she said, a command archive. Untouched for decades, she pressed her hand against the sphere, and the room lit up with projection screens. Voices filled the chamber, old voices, Some she recognized, others long dead. Recordings played one after another: battle logs, secret meetings, code black missions. Then it stopped on a name. Her name, Commander Thaya, Operation Fallvale. The voice echoed. She froze, listening as a secret council discussed her fate. "She refuses to obey the order," said one voice. "She must be made an example." Said another, "If we silence her now, no one will question again." Make the trial public, but control the outcome. Bury her name. Daniel looked at her, his jaw tight. "They planned it from the start." He said, "They used you." Thaya didn't speak. She just watched as the screen showed her standing at trial, alone, surrounded by silent judges. The hologram flickered and disappeared. Only the hum of the memory sphere remained. Daniel stepped closer. "This is it," he said. "This proves everything. Your name, your honor, it can be restored." Thaya placed a hand on the sphere again and downloaded the data into her wristband. "It's not just about me," she said, her voice low. "It's about everyone who was silenced like I was." Suddenly, a deep rumble shook the room. Red lights flashed overhead. Warning alarms echoed. Daniel spun around, weapon raised. What now? A voice boomed through the chamber. "Cold, mechanical, unauthorized access detected. Defense system activation in progress," Run Thaya said, grabbing his arm. They bolted back through the corridor as walls began to shift. Turrets unfolded. From the ceiling, old but still dangerous, lasers fired behind them. Barely missing their feet, they reached the exit, dove out as the ramp slammed shut. Sealing the secret once more, they lay on the ground. Breathing hard, dirt in their mouths, Daniel coughed and laughed. "Well, we found it," Thaya looked at the data crystal clutched in her hand. "Yes," she said. "Now we have to make the galaxy see it." Above them, the clouds broke open. And for the first time in days, stars appeared. They didn't feel safe. Not yet, but they felt closer. To something bigger than revenge. Something like justice. The sky was on fire. Not from war this time, but from voices. From thousands rising in unison across the stars. They had heard the truth. And they could not unhear it. Ray stood on the edge of a platform above the canyon city of Solberus. Below, banners waved with Syrax's symbol carved in light. The mark of a warrior once called Traitor, now called Hope. Beside him, Syraxa adjusted the strap on her arm blade. Her wounds had not fully healed, but her spirit burned brighter than ever. "This is it," Ray said. She didn't answer at first, just stared into the distance. Then she whispered, "I never thought I would live to see a day like this." A rebel ship hovered behind them, open ramp glowing. They were being offered sanctuary, a new life, safe, quiet, far away from the hunt. But Ray hadn't stepped aboard, not yet. Neither had she. The city still held ghosts. The council had fallen, but the machines they unleashed were still active. And deep in the Capitol Tower, something still pulsed, something dangerous. Lura's final message hinted at a backup server. A hidden AI that could rewrite history again, wipe out the truth with one quiet virus. Erase everything, make the dead forgotten again. Syraxa looked at him. Her eyes were softer now, less full of fire, more full of meaning. "If we go," she said, "the people might never know how close they came to losing it all." Ray gave a slow nod. "If we stay, we may not survive." She reached out and took his hand. "Then we stay together." They turned from the ship and ran across the rooftops one final time. No orders, no backup, no plan, only each other. Inside the tower, they faced steel corridors. Lined with defenses, the lights flickered like the heartbeat of a dying god. They moved fast, dodging blasts, striking with precision. Their rhythm was perfect, their steps like one breath. Then they reached at the core, the AI chamber. A voice greeted them, cold and calm. "You are not authorized." Ray raised his weapon. "Good," he replied, and fired. The wall sparked, the console cracked. Syraxa slammed her blade into the main circuit. The AI screamed a sound with no mouth, and the whole tower shuddered. The fire rushed up from the base like a wave of judgment. Ray pulled Syraxa close, shielding her with his body as the floor gave way. They fell through smoke and light and memory. And then silence. He woke first, buried under dust and heat and broken steel. He pushed rubble aside, coughing, choking. "Syraxa," he called. Voice raw, no answer. Then movement. A hand reached from the debris. He grabbed it, pulled her free. She was breathing, alive. Her eyes opened, and for the first time, she smiled with no sadness behind it. "You're getting good at saving me," she whispered. Ray laughed, though it hurt. "I learned from the best." Above them, the sky cracked, open as rebel ships descended. People cheered, not for war, but for what had survived it. The image of Ray and Syraxa, standing side by side, was captured by every lens, not as fugitives, but as the spark that ended the silence. They refused the medals, refused the fame. They asked only for one thing: peace, and a place no one knew their names. Years later, children told stories of a human and an alien warrior, two souls who defied war and walked through fire holding hands. They were called traitors once. Now they were legends, and somewhere on a quiet farm under silver moons, a woman with scarred arms sang battle songs to the wind, while a man cooked food that made her laugh. And they never stopped watching the sky, just in case it needed them again.